Good afternoon to you, class, and welcome to another exciting episode of your favorite television show and mine for Content 10. Look what happens when you're off for about a week and a half. I am your exciting host, your game show host, Professor Antune. And look, we took a small little hiatus, just like every television show does, has that little winter break and come back. And so we start up the episodes all over again. So we are on episode number 11, which means that we are all bright eyed and bushy tailed. And if you realize, I've not done anything in the grade book since we left, which was after week 9. So if you are watching this, there's a very good possibility that your speech has yet to be graded. And that's because, just like you, I'm entitled to a small little break. So I'm on the hunt right now, or audit, to get as many as I possibly can get done by the end of week 11. So no hesitation, you'll get them as soon as you can, and you'll get them before you go into that wonderful persuasion speech. So that way you can analyze what I've critiqued and what was good, what needed to be worked on. So that way you have enough time to get your stuff done to get that A in for the next speech. So without further ado, you know what I love to do, and that is share my screen, because there's just actually a couple more things. Again, this is week 11, so we've got another 5 weeks left. So there's not much left with this game show. So that being said, let me get you going on sharing this, shall I? Week 11, welcome back, folks. Trust me, it's not that bad. We are in the home stretch. If you notice, you have chapters 15, 16, and 17 due, and those are the only chapters left. Because although it's, there's a chapter 18 and a chapter 19, you already did those way in the very beginning of this course. But it's 3 more chapters, 5 points each. That's a total of 15 points, and you are done. We're done, done, done. The funny thing is that this week I'm actually going to be video lecturing the same exact time that you are taking your learning curve quizzes. So it's kind of like going one and the same. And you typically know that I always embed a video or two into those video lectures. So I want you to take those in very, very carefully, because these particular chapters are your final chapters and they gear towards your persuasion speech. Chapter 13, if I'm not mistaken, has something to do with your celebratory speech. I have to remember, because there's just so many chapters that you go through. So that's a whole different chapter that's not graded, but nonetheless, we're gonna probably go through it later on. But this time around, we do have, in terms of grading your learning curve quizzes, 15, 16, and 17. And I'm going to be lecturing them below in separate videos, as I always do. So you should be good to go with those. Also this week, I am going to go over audience analysis 2, which has specifically to do with your persuasion speech. That's actually due next week during week 12. That doesn't mean that I won't try and ram it into your head like I normally do. Also, next week, that is due engagement activity 4. It's the final engagement activity. And again, this is a group project as well, and that is due at the end of next week. So once again, I'll be assigning groups, and hopefully I'll get to it sometime this week, or I just may announce that you go with the same exact group that you did the last time. I haven't decided yet, but I will give you a definite on that within the next couple of days or so. So once again, engagement activity number 4, that is a group project, which means you do not turn something in as an individual. So if you don't get with your group, or for whatever the reason you can't get with your group, that's another thing that then you have to tell me that way ahead of time, not after you turn something in. But if you don't adhere to a project that is very specific to a group, then I will mark it as 0, like I did the last time. Yes, I know I sound cruel, but you know what? There's reasons for directions. And if you can't take them, if you can't understand them, then I don't know what to tell you, because you're of age, you're adults, so you kind of know what you're doing and what you don't want to do, for that matter. Excuse me. we're briefly going to go over exam number 2. Actually, we're not going to go over it all. I'm just going to tell you right now that it is due during week 13, and you already have that. So I want to call it a cheat sheet. It's basically a brief over every single chapter. I will talk about what's going to be covered with this particular one around how many points and so on and so forth. But in terms of your study guide, you already have one, and this is due in about 2 weeks. And we'll go over the calendar to let you know exactly what the due date is, because once again, this is not a Sunday due date. So that's something that I need you to remember when you do exam number 2. Also, we're going to talk very briefly about persuasive speech number 2, or I should say just go over your persuasive speech, which is due in about a week 14. So if we're at a week 11, it's due in 3 weeks. So I'll just go over the directions briefly. A lot of the stuff you already know about. There's just a couple things here and there that we're going to tie into. And this week's attendance has to do with basically telling me what your persuasive topic is. So it's just like the informative speech, where after you see this in this discussion board, and then you have the 3 video chapters right underneath in terms of your reply. I just need you to respond by the end of this week, by Sunday at 11:59, what your persuasion topic is. And you figure this out based on what you're interested in, what you want to argue within the parameters of what these chapters are telling you to do. And then we'll go over a little bit more details and whatnot within the next couple of weeks prior to week 14 when it's all due. Again, the topic needs to be had now because it gives you a better idea how to write out your audience analysis, which is due next week, which is 20 points. So think of it that way. So let me share the screen once again, so that way I can go over the calendar with you, and that way we can go from there. So if you look to your right, or I should say week 11, these 3 chapters are due clearly in blue, and your persuasive speech is due. I just said audience analysis number 2 is due the end of next week. Engagement activity number 4 is due next week. And we'll briefly go over your persuasive speech, which is week 14. So if you look at week 13, you have engagement activity number 4, as well as audience analysis number 2. Let's go into week 13, and then that's a whole different story in terms of discussing what extra credit is due. But if you look, your exam, 25 multiple choices. That's exam number 2. This time around, it covers chapters 6 through 11 and 15 through 18. 25 multiple choice questions, 25 points, which means it is 1 point apiece. It is a timed exam, and it is due by Friday, April the 9th at 11:59. More than likely, it is not open just yet. It'll probably be open prior to. So since it's due on a Friday, it more than likely will be due. I mean, it will probably be opened up on that Monday. So obviously 5 days from that, or 4 days from that, we're looking at April 4th or is it April 4th or April 5th? I can't remember the dates. So it's probably going to be open on Monday, and it's going to be due on that Friday. So again, 25 questions, 25 points. It shouldn't be too hard for you to figure this out. And again, those are the chapters right there. So you're looking at 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So that's 6 chapters right there. 15, 16, 17, 18. We're looking at 10 chapters that are actually due for you. So I'm not sure what is being asked of you. I just know that's what's going to happen. So now that we've gone over the calendar, and of course, if you look, we will check out audience analysis number 2 very, very briefly. Here's your module, and here is your week of what's due this week. Week 12, which is all the way through until April the 4th. Here is your audience analysis and where you upload it. Let's look at it very briefly. 20 points, you know how the upload goes, docs, PDF, or you type it in. And of course, this is where You somehow, I don't know where the upload is. And I'm sorry, it's probably the reason why I don't know where that upload is because it's under my view and it's not under student view. So let's try student view really quickly and see what it looks like. My apologies. There we go. So docs, PDF, type it in, text it, submit, it starts to upload, and then you go from there. Now, here are your requirements. And again, this isn't due for another week and a half. And it really is very, very, very similar to your audience analysis number 1, which was for your informative speech. Again, this is a page worth. You know how it goes. This time around, the criteria is centered around a persuasive speech. And so you have to possibly think about main arguments, your thesis for the speech that allows you to fulfill your criteria. And again, your purpose, your main objective is to persuade your audience on an issue. The audience analysis number 2 paper provides the opportunity for you to analyze and consider ways to construct your speech to better persuade your audience. 1 page, double spaced if you want, answering the following questions below. If you got less than 20 points, more than likely it's because you did not fulfill at least 1 page worth, or you barely answered the questions. They were one-liners. And so I basically got a paragraph's worth of work when in fact you were supposed to do 1 page. 4 questions are to be answered in fairly decent detail, which gives you 5 points apiece, which totals out to 20 points. And again, the main thesis and arguments. What do you want your audience to do after listening to your audience? Do you want them to go after a certain issue like you're passionate about? Do you want them to just sit there dormant and just say, okay? I know I'm making a joke, but if you understand, when it comes to an argument, do you want them to be passive or do you want them to do something when you are giving your argument? And again, characteristics come into play: political views, ability status, beliefs, attitudes, values, significant to consider when persuading them on an issue. And again, you may not know a lot about your audience, obviously, with these dynamic times. You're looking at, really not getting to know them face to face, but try and consider that they are within at least your age range, if nothing more. And if you look towards the left and you go through the people section, you can at least get a gauge as to who's what, where, and whatever, the age range, female to male, ethnicity, race, gender, all this other stuff. So that way you can kind of get an idea and gauge where you're at when it comes to your audience. But more than likely, you will find that your class is very, very diverse. So think about those characteristics. Your 3rd question, same as the last time, ethical issues you will need to keep in mind when adapting your speech to your audience. And how will your speech demonstrate, and this time around, this is a major one, ethos, pathos, and logos. So it's a major chapter that you're going to have to go through in order to understand exactly how you're going to construct this last question. That being said, remember that that particular chapter is due this week. And so this particular assignment is due the following week. So between my video lecture of this chapter and the chapter that you already have to go through in order to get your 5 points of your learning curve quizzes, you will better be able to answer that question that's in your audience analysis that's due next week. Not this week, next week. Now, if you want to turn it in early, that's entirely up to you. But what I am saying to you is the reason for that is so that way you can understand the buildup in order to do it. There's always reasons why certain assignments are due within that time, and it's because of the buildup. And so right now, and again, I can't memorize every chapter off the bat because I do it so often, but between 15, 16, and 17, there is a chapter that is delving into and goes deep into ethos, pathos, logos. Ethos being ethics, logos being logical reasoning, pathos being appeal, personal appeal. So when you are done with that chapter, when you are done listening to the video chapter, you will have a better gauge as to how to answer that last question in your audience analysis. I know I'm reiterating, but it's best to drive it in and continue to reiterate than to come to me and say, well, I didn't understand what was going on. No, these are the reasons behind that. So you get a better idea. Go back to this. That is audience analysis. Those are your directions for that one. On to the next. What else is due for week I can't even talk. Week 12 is your engagement assignment activity number for Ethos, Pathos, Logos. Again, not until next week. These are 4 PDFs. There's a couple questions on each of them. They're very, very nicely done. I'm not going to show you that just yet, but you can basically take a look if you want this week, or if you want to wait until next week, you can do that as well. And so there are definitely scenarios and gauges, and some of them are real life, and a lot of them have to do with, former presidents and their speeches and what they did and what did they end up taking on. It was an Ethos, Pathos, Logos. So there's a handful of them right there. It's a group project. And we'll go into more detail about it next week. Yeah, next week. Like almost forgot there. Let me get out of this really quickly, because this is your checklist on a few other things that we will go more into in the next couple of weeks. So let me scroll down very nicely. I'm trying. Dun, dun, dun. Week 9, we just passed that. Week 10, week 11 we're into. We just went over these. This is your checklist as well as your samples for your persuasive speeches. And why is week 13 not here for your section? I don't know, but that has to do actually with your particular exam. And I'm not sure why it's not there, and my apologies for that. That's something that I'm going to have to figure out. And then, of course, here is your here's your week 14. Just so you understand, you're watching this right now. By the time you watch this, I will get that week 13 up. So no need to worry. Week 13 has everything to do, and it's going to be there when it has to do with your exam number 2. We've already discussed it. Now, week 14, really, really quickly. Here's a persuasive speech. This is going to be 70 points. This goes into a window. This window will actually have a lot more detail for you. Not just yet, but it will have a lot more detail for you when you get to it about what is expected for your persuasive speech. And again, that window that you upload, that goes straight into Go React. Don't you just love that? Once again, this time around, this is if you want to already take a task or, take a grasp as to what is expected of you. Again, this is 70 points just off of the physical presentation. This has nothing to do with your outline. This has nothing to do with your works cited page. This is a different type of a breakdown than the last speech of yours. There's a couple more things that are going into it, which is why it's a little bit different. Obviously, you're going to have to talk about policies. You're going to have to talk about logic, emotional appeal, reasoning, a plan, a practicality. So there's a couple more things that are going in there. And language is also very important, as if it wasn't important the last time around for your informative, now it's even more important. And of course, we talk about your delivery, your intro, your out, and of course, penalty if you go over or under when it comes to your presentation in terms of your time. Your outline, again, you submit it here. It's basically identical to what you did when it came to your informative speech, the same exact thing, 20 points. And obviously, if you look, same exact evaluation. Let's talk really, you know what? No, I'll do it at the end. Here's your evaluation for that as well, for your outline. Oh, look, outline is parenthetical citations. That's what I'm going to talk about in just a minute. Sorry about this. Persuasive works cited, upload it right here, 10 points. And if you look, the same exact rubric when it comes to your works cited page. So this is what I wanted to talk about. Obviously, it was really, really quick when it came to, I did it as soon as possible, which was your outlines and your works cited pages. And a lot of you got 10 points when it came to your works cited pages because you followed it to the letter. What you didn't follow, or what you may not have followed, was that the second line in your works cited, like let's just say you had 5, even though it was calling for 6, I was more than fine with 5. And of course they had to be legit works pages, like the legit research. So a lot of times people didn't do a hanging indentation. Sometimes there were a lot of alphabetical order. I questioned a couple of things that were credible in terms of what you did in terms of research. And of course, when it came to like dates, you just the formatics of how you actually structured. Like sometimes the dates weren't there. Sometimes I didn't even get an author, and I'm like, well, what the hell? So I have to go back and like look to see, well, was there really an author to this or not? Or maybe it was just, a site where it had no author, but there was some sort of an article, which was weird. But I looked, believe it or not, there were moments when I looked when I'm like, okay, so where is this going? So your works cited, a lot of people's works cited were pretty good. The outline in and of itself was where people were having not necessarily issues, but the average points that I distributed was 13. And the reason being was your introduction and your conclusion, your opening elements and your closing elements were actually pretty good. They followed to the letter, fantastic. But what wasn't followed to the letter, there was 2 things. I typically gave 3 out of 5 points when it came to your body. Why? Because the biggest thing that wasn't specific and deliberately labeled was the transitional phrases. And if you go back and if I gave you 3 points, what I always did was, if I gave you 5, then you basically knew you hit it to the letter. But if I gave you 3, what I did was I copied and pasted what the 3 points criteria was, and then I put the asterisks up among the signposts and the transitionals. Because what 9 times out of 10 happened was either you didn't have a transitional phrase at all from going from one point to the other, or what you ended up doing was your main point was actually a transitional phrase. And I was like, wait a second, make that a transition. I mean, literally label it as transition and then go into it and then start labeling your next main point appropriately, because your transition cannot be your main point, or you're trying to combine it. So again, it was just a matter of you had it wrong. So that's a lot of times where there was a 3 out of 5. Now, when it came to your sources, MLA formats, I need to be very specific. I could have sworn I was, but your oral presentation is one thing. Your written work is a whole different story. I shouldn't say a whole different story. They should be very similar, but at the same exact time, when it's written, it's written. So you cite your source and you paraphrase it and you cite it the way that you would say it, and you put that actually in your outline, and that's fantastic. But then after that, what you have to do is you still have to, again, it's in written form, you have to somehow cite it out. You took your oral citation, you put it in a written form, you still have to cite it. How do you do that? You have to use parenthetical phrases. You have to cite it that way, which is why I highlighted in your rubric that this is what is expected of you. If you do a source, you have to parenthetically cite it. And I've gotten 1 or 2 arguments. Well, I cited it. Sure, you took your oral citation and you put it in the written form, but you still have to parenthetically cite it because it's written. It's one thing for it to be oral, which I will see. It's another thing for it to be written. So it's almost as if you're citing something twice in written format. Unfortunately, it's just a small thing. It's why I said MLA format. I highlighted. Many of you ignored it. But what I'm telling you right now is that if you ignore it the second time, it is on you more so than it is on me, because I cannot stress this enough. So if you got 0 points for your sources MLA format, that is the reason why. So I believe I've touched on everything. What is expected this week, which isn't a whole heck of a lot, but nonetheless, don't forget your attendance To count for attendance this week, it has to be that you have to come up with your persuasive topic. I briefly went over not the chapters, but what's to be expected in weeks 12, weeks 13, as well as weeks 14. Things that I have to correct in the modules, I will be doing that very shortly. And by the time you see this, they will already be corrected. And things that I will add on in terms of what to expect when it comes to your engagement activity number 4, which is a group project, as well as more direction to your persuasive speech. That's also coming this week. So you don't have a lot on your plate this week, but nonetheless, there's a lot to prep up as we continue to build up towards your persuasive speech within the next 3 weeks. Anything that you need to ask me, you know where to find me. And of course, my office hours are Tuesdays and Thursdays from noon to 2. So if there's something that is actually pertinent that you have to have a Zoom call with me, by all means, get on it as soon as possible so that way we can get things squared away. Other than that, you guys have a great week. Stay safe. Please no one get any COVID. I beg of you because I want to see those persuasive speeches because it's so close to the date or so close to the ending. Let's just put it that way. Have a safe week, guys, and I will talk to you guys soon. Bye.